We begin tonight with the number with which we began last night, $270 million. The sum EQC has so far spent on repairing home repairs done after the Canterbury earthquakes. Now, it should be pointed out, $270 million is not the final repairs total. Potentially nowhere near it. There are more than 300 claims in court against EQC, and as the Minister told us last night, Treasury is now trying to project future liabilities for repairs yet to be done. Again, that number is unknown, the cost unknown, but lawyer Peter Woods, who's represented more than 200 homeowners against EQC, says there's potentially thousands of homes that require remediation that don't even know about it yet. Again, that's an unknown number. And another person with extensive experience of the damage and the failure to repair it correctly asks, what have we learned from it all? Not enough. Lester Bryant is General Manager of a quantity surveying business that has prepared reports for hundreds of homes needing repairs. And he says the issue we need to address still is the scoping, the initial assessments which determine the extent of the damage and the repair work required, both in Christchurch and in future events like this. Bad scoping, he says, is where almost all the repair issues started.
And the scoping had no set standard, no set methodology, and because of its inadequacy, it essentially meant that a lot of repairs that were done or repairs that aren't being done are based around the arguments from a lack of recording damage properly. And the repairs, which are going to continue to occur, all happen because of a very poor scoping standard. Now, I liken it to a medical term where they talk about prescription without diagnosis as malpractice. And we've got the same thing in the buildings here, is that properties were maldiagnosed, and the repairs were set in place. And even if the repairs were successful or good quality workmanship, they will ultimately fail. And I know of a number of properties that have had more than 2 repairs done to them, and they keep failing because the diagnosis is wrong, the methodology is wrong, and subsequently the offers are completely inadequate. They will not get a true settlement on their claim.
And Lester, was the initial flawed scope the first domino to fall? In other words, did everything start from that failed initial assessment? Yeah,
it did. And in fact, I don't... the lack of addressing that issue has caused most of the issues that have subsequently occurred. The scoping is the significant issue.
So, and this is the big question, isn't it? Do you think we have any idea yet how many homes where people think the work has been done or was never required actually still require substantial structural work?
Yes, and what I'd appreciate, one of the reasons I'm talking to you, John, is the media putting some attention on the fact that a lot of people have signed off on cash settlements and methodologies with essentially gagging orders or non-disclosure agreements, who have subsequently gone on, they've been paid out cash, gone on to do the repair and found the money was substantially short of what was required. But they can't go to the media, they can't take legal action because there's non-disclosure agreements against those settlements. And on a similar vein, the tradesmen that were involved, because in many or most cases tradesmen were involved in the insurance companies creating their offers, those tradesmen should also have gagging orders removed from them because I work a lot with tradespeople and they are furious at what they've been forced to do. But they can't come forward, they can't whistleblow. It's a significant issue, and it's the biggest issue, and I deal with lawyers on this topic. It's the biggest issue we deal with, is a complete disagreement on methodology based on the scope.
Now, I want to interrupt here because this takes us back to the first domino to fall, which was the initial assessment. And what Jerry Brownlee has said, and it is a very reasonable point to make, what Sir Martin Weaver said, is that EQC had a permanent staff of 20-something people at the time of these earthquakes. Suddenly you have tens of thousands of homes that need assessments as fast as possible. So you get people in and they are retired school teachers, retired policemen or women or whatever. They have little or no knowledge about what they're looking for, but they have a checklist. The problem was the checklist didn't send them under the floor as forensically or as often as it should have. But tell me, that if this event happens again in one of the cities in New Zealand that is vulnerable to earthquakes, we are better prepared with scopes that will give us meaningful assessments, and we will not have to go through all of this again?
Absolutely not. Everyone's at risk. There is no... I still to this day get new scope, DRAs and offers from insurance companies on properties. Like I just had the latest one last week, and they are completely wrong. And you can see it. It's not hard to spot, John.
So we don't have a meaningful, rigorous template for post-earthquake assessment which would make sense and anyone, including the retired school teacher and the retired policeman, could use?
No, it goes beyond that, because you can send... I have no problem sending in a retired teacher to look at a property, and all he's doing is recording damage, if that's the first part of a scope. The bricks have fallen off, the wall is cracked, that window's broken, whatever. I have no issues with that. A layman can do that. What I do take an issue with is that diagonal crack in the jib. Is that behind that, is there a structural issue? That hump in the floor, is that a structural issue or a foundation issue? I have an issue with that, and that the people who best know, the professionals in the field should be assessing that, diagnosing what the issue is, and sometimes it requires further diagnosis, like a geotechnical report or a land survey report. And once the information is at hand, then you start to say this is the method for repairing that problem. If we don't repair this problem, the issues will continue. Not repairing the crack in the jib when it was really a structural issue caused by a foundational issue. That's my problem with it.
And that brings us back to that line you used before. What was it? Prescription without diagnosis is malpractice? Is that the...
Correct. That's Hippocrates. It's one of his sayings.
Okay, so what you're saying is we were prescribing before we had effectively diagnosed.
Absolutely, and I'll give you an illustration. I've got a property I'm dealing with now. EQC has gone in and repaired the foundation, cracked jib in the house. They've gone in and they've repaired the ring foundation the first time and the cracked jib. But then the foundation started sinking. And the house essentially bowed. So they came in and they jack and packed the house again, and they patched the cracks again, and now it's sinking again. So we're on to a third time. Now the real issue is, and we all know it, it's TC3 land, and the land is de-densified through liquefaction, and it's essentially the land is sitting on jelly and it's completely failing, and the land has to be addressed.
So Lester, this is an issue of spending money repairing a home when the land beneath it needs remediation or is still moving or subsiding or is simply not solid. Now, in those circumstances, spending money on the home when the land is not solid would seem to be a fiscal risk at best. So how much money has been spent on repairs in Canterbury in such circumstances? Do you have any idea?
I would have no doubt it's in the billions of dollars, John. So I'll give you an illustration. We've had properties. I've got one at the moment. It's owned by a policeman. The insurance company assessment and offer was in the region of $300,000. We assessed the property. Now, this has major issues because it's built on rock, and the rock is separated, and there's big drumming and gaps under the floors. And there's also a new stream formed underneath the house because of the earthquake. So there's a massive amount of foundational issues on essentially a block house with retaining walls. And we assessed a thorough repair on that property at over $1.5 million on a $300,000 offer.
$1.5 million?
Versus $300,000, yeah.
Lester Bryant, so it's the scoping in many cases, and we're going to talk about this a bit later. The scoping is the original assessment. What is wrong with your house? How much is it going to cost to repair it? If the scope is wrong, the repairs will be wrong.